In 2020, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer sought to shut down Enbridge's Line 5 pipeline, saying it posed an unreasonable risk to the Great Lakes. That shutdown has not yet happened, but there is ongoing litigation and political pressure on the 70-year-old pipeline that carries oil more than 1,000 kilometers from Western Canada to Ontario. Mike Fernandez is Senior Vice President of Public Affairs, Communications and Sustainability at Enbridge, and he joins us now on why the company stands by its pipeline and other plans. Mike, good to have you in that chair. Thanks
Great
for
to
coming
be here,
in.
Steve.
Just tell us a little, I suspect everybody's heard of Line 5, but just some of the other particulars. It starts exactly where and goes to exactly where?
Yeah, so it begins in Alberta and cuts its way, through Michigan and a number of Great Lakes states, and then back up through Sarnia. And along the way, it makes a lot of stops at refineries and major businesses and fractionators in order to fuel our lives.
70 years old.
70 years old, but consistently has operated well, and certainly well at the Straits of Mackinac, which have been at issue.
What kind of shape is it in for a 70-year-old pipeline?
Actually, extraordinarily well. When it was constructed at sort of a framework and a design that is as good or better than standards today. The walls of the pipe are actually thicker than most pipes in both Canada and the United States. It's made of the same steel as the bridge at the Straits of Mackinac. So it really has met the test of time. Now, there have been concerns at different times. We've had large ships coming through the Straits of Mackinac that have dropped anchor on the pipe at different times. We've seen sort of the anchors that hold the pipe in place have loosened at different points. They've had to be retightened, but thankfully there have not been major issues there other than a lot of concern.
Why should those issues not concern us?
Well, one, it has operated, as you stated, for 70 years and safely. That said, we're aware of the concerns. We spend a lot of money in order to assure the safety of the pipeline.
How much? Give me a hint.
So
How much?
Over $100 million.
Since when?
Over probably the last 5 years. And so we look at that and say, long term, let's make this easier on everybody. So in 2018, what we did is we worked with the state legislature in Michigan, and we set ourselves on a course to build a tunnel that would actually reside some 100 feet below the base of the waters at the Straits of Mackinac. And that's where the pipeline would ultimately be encased. So it would be out of the waters, so no issue in terms of spills into the water. Pipelines are embedded in tunnels all over the world. So this is nothing new.
Well, you heard what the Michigan governor had to say, though. She's not yet convinced. Why do you think?
Well, actually, she said what she would have liked to have done and what the Attorney General would have liked to have done is shut down the current pipeline. But she realizes there's great support for the tunnel. And in fact, 70% of all Michiganders today support the tunnel.
How do you know that?
Survey research.
You did some polling on it.
We did.
What question did you ask?
Well, we asked about the viability, what people thought of the viability of the current pipeline, which again, overwhelming majority supporting, and then 70% supporting the tunnel.
We have returned to this subject from time to time because, of course, this is a big deal for the province of Ontario, and we had some experts in our studio. Gosh, I can't remember how long ago it was, several months ago. Anyway, Warren Mabey, Canada Research Chair, Renewable Energy Development, Queen's University. Sounds like you know who he is. Here's what he had to say about this. We'll play this clip, and then we'll come back and chat.
Okay.
Sheldon, if you would.
I don't think it can prevent oil spills per se. It can minimize the impact of oil spills. Enbridge has a history, and a lot of people are aware of that history. They've had some fairly damaging spills, including the Kalamazoo River a decade or so back. There are a lot of people who are very concerned about what might happen should those automatic procedures not kick in as quickly as they could, or should somebody miss something, some important piece of data. So, I think that people are right to be concerned. This is a risky point in the line. There are multiple risky points in this line.
Okay, so the drinking water for millions of people, obviously there's concern. What do you want to speak to on that?
Well, I think, one, clearly there have not been spills from this pipeline. Secondly, the spill that he refers to, which is on a separate line, really ignited a transformation in safety for the company. It happened over a decade ago. And as a new employee, when I joined the company a few years ago, I was actually given a ring that was made from that pipeline. And there's a story behind it. And to force all of us, even those of us who aren't actually working on pipelines, to know that safety matters and it matters most.
A ring as in to wear on your finger?
No, it's really in a little box, and we look at it, we talk about the story behind it, and the lessons learned from that oil spill, and the cost of cleanup to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
So this issue is top of mind for you folks.
Absolutely.
Let me just fact check one thing with you, which is that we have heard critics say 1 million gallons of oil, I don't know what that is in metric, but we'll say gallons for now, has spilled from Line 5 at some point during the course of its life. True or false?
False.
False?
False in the way that it gets characterized. Context is everything. The reality is there have been spills while we've dealt with maintenance inside the gate on our property, but there have been no significant spills that have caused harm to other people's property or the environment in general.
No significant spills that have affected the Great Lakes? No significant?
None.
So some smaller ones?
None.
What are you prepared to do? I mean, you can be on top of everything and still you know what happens. Stuff happens, as they say. How prepared are you to respond to a catastrophic incident if it happens?
We control what flows through the pipeline. We have ways in which to dial things down very quickly and safely. The odds of there being any kind of issue at the Straits of Mackinac today are fairly slim, despite the political rhetoric.
Well, okay, let's talk politics for a second, because you've told us about the tunnel that you want to build in the lake bed underneath the Straits of, and we should remind people, you pronounce it Mackinac, even though it's spelled Mackinac.
That's right.
But it's pronounced Mackinac. Okay, this all hinges on an environmental review of Line 5, which has apparently been delayed by Joe Biden's administration at the moment. I gather it's, what, till 2025? So you're...
Well, yeah, so what's transpired here is, so we made a joint filing with the federal government and the state of Michigan back in April of 2020, seeking environmental permits to get this job done. We got the permit from the state of Michigan in 2021. So even Governor Whitmer's administration, who wanted to close down the current pipeline. Why? In part, I think, because they're intent and urgent about, let's get on with building the tunnel. Let's make this, what Enbridge is saying is a safe pipeline. Let's make it even safer, and let's do it quickly. Fast forward to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They got the paperwork at the same time and all the geotechnical survey research that had been done. And they come back just 2 weeks ago and say, it's going to take us at least to the middle of 2025 to get the draft environmental impact statement.
So how are you dealing with that?
And so what that would mean, we couldn't put a shovel in the ground until 2026, and in all likelihood, the tunnel's not complete until sometime around 2030. And that's certainly not what I think Governor Whitmer wants. It's not what Enbridge wants. Time is money. And for those that are concerned that we need to address this quickly, you'd think, we got to move on to the tunnel. And the Biden administration itself had reestablished a set of regulations that would have said in these kinds of cases that have relatively low environmental impact in terms of future state, they should approve in 2 years. And on top of it, John Podesta, who works for the White House on a lot of these matters, told a group of energy executives and government officials down in Houston a month ago that we need to move smarter, we need to move faster when it comes to low impact permitting. And so
administration doesn't seem to
Somehow
with
the
you on
right
this.
hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing.
So talk to us about the impact. If you don't actually get shovels in the ground for another 3 years and this thing doesn't happen until 2030, what are the implications?
Well, the implications right now are one of cost, frustration probably by a number of different parties. And in some ways, it just becomes a noisier process by which I'm sure, opponents will, continue to yell and scream.
If this thing doesn't happen on the schedule that you would like it to happen, does that put the viability of this 70-year-old pipeline in any more question?
Not really.
Not really is not a no.
No, but right now the pipeline is safe. We're spending millions of dollars every day, to go ahead and we've got a 24/7 operations center there at the Straits of Mackinac. We run inline and outside tests of the pipe periodically. We have that verified by PHMSA, which is the federal regulator for this. It's a big deal. And what you'd like to do is to think that our two countries agree on so much. We share the same values. You would like to think that we can come together and reach some agreement on this.
There is another group that we need to hear from on this, and that is 12 federally recognized Anishinaabe tribes in the U.S. And many more in Ontario have passed resolutions calling for Line 5's closure. Again, I want to play a clip. This is Michelle Woodhouse, Environmental Defense and Métis Water Protector, speaking to that. Okay, Sheldon, if you would.
The fact that this poses an existential threat to the way of life for the Anishinaabe people is unacceptable. This is an existential threat to anyone who's in the area. It's an ecological disaster in the making.
Does Line 5 violate treaty rights?
It does not, and it doesn't pose an existential threat. The actual impact on any land is less than an acre in order to build this tunnel to insert the new pipeline in. We've worked heavily and closely with a lot of indigenous tribes in the United States and Canada. Our last big project was Line 3 in Minnesota. That had a huge impact, a positive impact on indigenous communities throughout Minnesota. We had people working on the line. We had communities that were able to raise additional revenue from the line. Total impact in that state was over $400 million.
Do you know whether this subject came up during the recent meeting between your president and our prime minister?
Boy, we'd like to think so. It was not a part of the official agenda. But the announcement of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in terms of the lengthened calendar, it came out like a day or two ahead of their meeting. So I would think that there were some conversations. That said, even if they didn't talk within that meeting, this has been a conversation, as you know. Canada invoked the Transit Pipelines Treaty of 1977, and which essentially says that energy should flow freely across the two borders. What's interesting, by the way, about that treaty is that treaty was essentially negotiated by the current prime minister's father with a newly minted Democratic president in Jimmy Carter. It also was approved, as they have to be validated by the U.S. Senate, by a very young senator from the state of Delaware by the last name of Biden.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. Everything old is new again.
There you go.
Let me ask you about Enbridge itself, because it is one of the largest renewable energy companies in Canada. It also operates the world's, I think, longest crude oil transportation system. And some people may see those as being in conflict. So what are you?
What we are is first of all, as an industry, we're an industry in transition, and we like to think at Enbridge that we're helping to lead that energy transition. So for the last decade or so, we've spent over $10 billion, and we're slated to spend $2 billion plus a year in order to invest in renewables, but also into new technologies that make what we do from a traditional standpoint cleaner and better.
And if you're trying to get to net zero, and yet you think there are still requirements to spend billions on current projects, do you, in effect, torpedo the chances of getting to net zero sooner by keeping fossil fuels alive longer?
No, and part of The real issue is how do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions? If people were really focused and urgent on that, what we would be doing in Canada and certainly in the United States is spending a lot of time thinking about how do we displace the amount of coal that's being used across the planet, because we can quickly reduce greenhouse gas emissions by supplanting that coal use with natural gas.
Natural gas is better than coal, but it's still polluting.
Well, except that there are ways to improve, and make that cleaner than it is today.
We shall see, and we'll stay in touch with this story. Mike Fernandez from Enbridge, thanks so much for coming into TVO tonight.
Thank you, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.